Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Susan Mundry, and I am the Alliance Facilitator for the Regional Education Laboratory Northeastern Ireland's Teacher Preparation Research Alliance. Today, we will be introducing culturally responsive teaching and the practice of data literacy and culturally responsive teaching. And in this session, we will be really learning to think through how within our programs we will be helping to better prepare our teacher candidates to use culturally responsive practice and particularly use data and information to better understand our children, our students, and their strengths and really their interests. As we start this session today, we want to acknowledge the challenges facing our nation right now. Especially as we're talking about culturally responsive data literacy, we would be remiss not to acknowledge the inequities that the COVID pandemic has exposed and the racial injustice we are confronting currently. Both these tragedies have put the systemic and institutional inequities that prevail in our nation on center stage and offer a stark reminder that we all need to do more to promote equity and inclusion in all our systems. And we hope that some of the materials that we're sharing with all of you today will be another resource to help move us in the direction of equitable education. I'd like to introduce our speakers today, Ellen Mandenack, who is a senior scientist and researcher at WestEd and for the Regional Educational Lab, Northeastern Ireland. Ellen, would you like to say hello?
Hi, everyone. I'm Ellen Mandenack. I am in Scottsdale, Arizona, where it currently is 112 degrees, so I hope you're at someplace better. Look forward to a meaningful session today, especially considering the events that have occurred over the past months and most recently, that we hope this will be relevant to you all.
Thank you, Ellen. And Saroja Warner, who is the director of our Talent Development and Diversity Practice Area at WestEd and a coaching expert serving the Regional Education Laboratory Northeastern Ireland. Saroja, would you like to say hello?
Hi, everyone. Thank you again for taking the time out, given everything that's going on in the world, to join us today. I know Ellen, Susan, and I we're very excited in planning this, and particularly given the fact that we had to put this off. For those of you who are familiar with Workshop 1, we were supposed to have come back together since April, so we were just really excited to be able to do this at this point in time.
Thank you, Saroja. And again, welcome to all of you. And this event is being sponsored by the Regional Education Laboratory Northeastern Ireland. We're one of 10 labs around the country that is supported by the U.S. Department of Education to support states in our region to conduct research studies of interest to them, to find and disseminate important research to educators in our region, and to convene research partnerships and alliances to help our educators apply and use the best research to improve their own practice and to improve education. Our primary work also includes designing and conducting professional learning and technical assistance to help our clients, whether they be states, districts, institutions of higher ed, to use research and to use data to improve their practice. As Saroja mentioned, this is a session 2 of a two-part session. That the first one began way back in November. It seems like a long time ago. And because of that, and because we have many people who are joining us for this session who were not a part of session 1, we have designed the agenda to recap many of the concepts covered in session 1, and so that everyone can be all on the same page. So we will be we will be today really talking about how and where to integrate culturally responsive data literacy in your programs, and giving you an opportunity to really look at the tools that we recommend you bring back to your colleagues to do that work in your own programs. To accomplish that, today's agenda is, after providing this welcome, we will reintroduce some of the concepts from session 1. We'll engage in helping you look at outcome maps of where in your programs you address some of the concepts that are important for developing culturally responsive practice, and then give you some opportunity to apply that work and then provide some next steps in closing. I do ask that at the very end we will link you to a stakeholder survey. It's very important that we get feedback and information, so we ask you to just stay on for those last couple of minutes to complete that survey. Thank you. So I'm going to turn it over to Saroja Warner to take us through the goals for the day. Saroja?
Thanks, Susan. So today's goals are, I think Susan just mentioned, we want to recap some of what we covered in Workshop 1 back in the fall in relation to the concepts of culturally responsive teaching and data literacy, and for the focus for today, culturally responsive data literacy. So bringing those two things together. We want to identify where within your courses, your programs that you're offering, there are opportunities to teach culturally responsive data literacy to prepare candidates with the skills, the knowledge, the competencies to be culturally responsive data literate teachers. And we are going to walk you through a process for thinking about how to infuse culturally responsive data literacy learning within your program, your curriculum, and generally over the course of study. And through this, all of this, the process, we're going to introduce you to some tools and resources and other supports that can be used by you and your program staff and faculty to strengthen culturally responsive data literacy among candidates in your program. Before we get into the content for today, we do want to contextualize our time together in some learning norms. I am an avid sort of student of the work of Robin DiAngelo, and I'm sure many people on this call are familiar with her work. And this quote I just find to be very powerful when I'm sort of grounding myself in work related to culturally responsive teaching practice. Robin DiAngelo says, "The key to moving forward is what we do with our discomfort. We can use it as a door out, blame the messenger and disregard the message, or we can use it as a door in by asking, why does this unsettle me? What would it mean for me if this were true?" And I find this just a powerful grounding statement in my work with culturally responsive teaching practice, and probably even more powerful today, given where we are as a country and the events that we're all experiencing. And so we have a few learning norms bulleted underneath this quote on the slide. You'll see them here. I'll give you a moment just to read them over. In sum, we hope that folks will be present while we're on this workshop together. Be kind and not nice to one another. State your views in ways that invite challenge. Be suspicious of that little voice that says, "What's the point?" Be curious and inquire into the views of others. Be patient. And then to help us all do the same. Now, I appreciate that these learning norms are much more challenging for us all to essentially uphold, and particularly to help each other to reinforce in a virtual space, especially when we can't even see each other. Many of us are very used to these days working on Zoom, where we can see one another. but I'm going to continue to push us and encourage us to exercise, sort of kindness, patience, and a curiosity and inquiry stance as much as possible through this platform. And with that, I'm going to pass over to my colleague Ellen to get us started.
Okay, thank you, Saroja. First of all, a number of the documents that we have, we will be presenting to you today are in your handouts, and we would like you to refer to them. For those of you who are repeat participants, you will have seen some of them, but for those who are new, most of you, we will do a recap, but we really would like you to take a look at these documents because they're meant to be resources for you, things to consider, and to think deeply about the whole notion of culturally responsive data literacy. And one of the goals that REL Northeastern Islands will be undertaking after this session is to transform these materials, I won't say a user's guide, but a document that you can refer to in your own educator preparation programs as a way that as instructors and professors and clinical practice folks that you may use them in a way that is meaningful to you. So stay tuned, that is coming soon to your institution. We'd like you to take a moment to look at the handouts for the practice scenarios, which is in handout 1. One of the key topics in data use right now is that it is often accused of taking a deficit model, looking at the negative. We speak of problems of practice, remediating learning issues, so on and so forth, as opposed to an asset model. And you heard Saroja and Susan both speak of interest, positives, strengths of learners. So what we would like you to do now is take a look at scenario 1 and think about the difference between an asset model of looking at a student's strengths and interests and cultural background as opposed to the negatives. And in the chat box, explain to us through the chat how the data you might look at in that scenario might differ and how you would make interpretations, and how might your actions differ. So please take a few moments to look at the scenario, and please be active and vociferous in your responses. We want to hear from you. Last time, Saroja and I actually modeled this out, but we're not going to do this today. You can quickly read through the scenario, and if you have questions, you can post those as well. Part of the key to an asset model is thinking about the data that you need, not just the obvious data. So consider that as you're writing your responses. I see people typing. Thank you so much for that response. Thank you, Susan. Emily, can you say more about able to gain buy-in? Buy-in to what? Jennifer, spot on. Thank you. Thank you, Natalie. Another great comment. Jennifer, what qualitative data do you have in mind as well as the quantitative? Home environment. Yes, great idea. Emily, we will be sharing resources. So that's a great segue. Hi, Jana. Thank you for that. Good to see you on this. While everyone is thinking about this, I'm going to set the stage for you to look at the next scenario as well. But the idea here is that in an asset model, you may well want to look at different sorts of resources. In an accountability model, one will often only look at test scores. And from all of your responses that I've seen come across so far, you're looking very broadly at different sources of data, particularly the context, the home environment, and many other sources of data that may explain the situation here. So, and one of the responses, Jennifer, you talk about the whole child. That is exactly the target that we have in mind here about the asset model. Understand the context from which the student comes to be able to understand why the student performance or other indices may or may not be functioning up to speed. So since we've got about a few minutes left on this, take a quick look at scenario 2 while I'm speaking about, and the same thing would pertain. What data would you use in a deficit model? What would you use in an asset model? How would the interpretations and the actions differ? While I'm speaking about this, let me move on to talk very quickly about data literacy and what is the meat of the situation here. In the first session, and for those of you who know the work that I've done, was to try and understand the skills, knowledge, and dispositions that teachers and educators more generally need to bring to the table to understand how to use data. But in collaboration with Susan and Saroja, we realized that it doesn't go far enough just to look at the 5 components that are on your screen now of identify a problem of practice, which is a negative statement, all the way up to looking at the data and evaluating the outcomes and understanding what to do. So what a colleague and I, Edith Gummer, developed was this data inquiry cycle. And many frameworks around data use a similar one. But what this does is show, and there are many skills and knowledge and dispositions that are involved here, the iterative process of data use, from identifying an issue, asking a question that is researchable, understanding what data you need, transforming that data in ways into actionable instructional actions, ultimately to look at the outcomes and then maybe iterate throughout that cycle. And the full-blown cycle you can find in your handouts as handout 2. Why this is important? Because there is an emphasis on using evidence and relying on data and evidence and facts from which to make decisions. It's also shifting away from accountability to more understanding continuous improvement. There's no question it's important, and what we've done through the 3 of us collaborating is to demonstrate the need, especially now, the merger of culturally responsive practice with data literacy, and a couple of you have mentioned it, to use the asset model, attempt to understand the whole child, the situation from which that child comes, have a more comprehensive view of the student to be able to understand how to approach the learning needs and the situational needs of the students because kids are more complex than ever now. And what this means is using more diverse data sources, not just test scores that serve to marginalize the most challenged children. So thinking very broadly about the data sources as you did in that first survey. So that's the background from which we are coming in the merger of these two concepts of culturally responsive practice and data literacy. So now I will turn this over to Saroja to walk you through the next phase of the session.
Thanks so much, Ellen. So we are going to do some activities, and before we get into these, I want to ask folks to make sure you have a few things handy, right? So as we segue in this workshop, Ellen has referred, I think, a few times to the handout. So there's a handout packet that we made available for this workshop. It's available, I think, in your bottom left screen should be the same as mine. Download section, a pod where you can get the handout. If you haven't done that before, it'd be great for you to make sure that you have downloaded it and have it available either electronically or if you've got a printer handy to print those out, because we are going to be working much more in the next few minutes with handouts 4 through 8. So I just wanted to flag that for folks. Also be helpful, again, I don't know, I find it challenging these days as we're on Zoom for meetings and workshops to be present on my Zoom as well as taking notes on my computer. And so you may want to just have a notebook handy, some paper and a pen to be able to take some notes and to do some, capture some of your thinking over the rest of this workshop as we're going to do some more interactive things. So we'll just give you a second to do that. While you're pulling those things up, I do want to make a comment. I was thinking about what my colleague Ellen just said. You know, the kids are so much more complex today, and it's been a challenge, right, for all of us, you know, whether you're parents and you're raising children, or your grandparents and you're raising children, or you are a teacher and you're working directly with children through your job. What we're seeing, you know, lately is that, you know, our children are just bringing so much more, I would say, like knowledge and cultural capital, right, to the space, the learning spaces than maybe we remember ourselves when we were in school. And this work is so important for that very reason, is like we need to keep up as educators with how much smarter, I'm just going to say it, how much smarter our kids are today. But especially, you know, recognizing in a way today that we probably hadn't recognized in decades past, that complexity of our kids that is rooted in their personal identities and their cultural understandings of the world, you know, their perceptions of others, their perceptions of themselves, the way people perceive them, that those things, I think they're not new, but they are certainly more salient in our work as educators today. And so it's, you know, not necessarily that our kids are more culturally complex. It's that we're appreciating that cultural complexity in a new way today, and recognizing that there's an opportunity there in our preparation of teachers in particular to do better, and embracing that cultural complexity, and, you know, bringing asset models to helping them to learn. So all that said, we're going to get into an example of how you can start to embed culturally responsive data literacy in your preparation programs. And that process really starts, like I think any process in our reform of our teacher prep programs. I say our because I see myself as well as part of the prep community. It's continuing to teach at the University of Maryland College Park in our prep programs there, the very program I came out of. And, you know, that process of program mapping is an integral and critical part of making sure our programs are, cohesive and aligned to our program goals, our outcomes, the different requirements we have for candidates. For folks who are involved in program review at the state level, maybe at the national level with program accreditation, you're probably very familiar with outcomes mapping and mapping your program. But there could be some folks who are not as familiar. That said, we just have a quick poll we would like for people to respond to. Have you and or your team that you're part of in your prep program completed a program outcomes map? As we mentioned before, this workshop was really designed to be a two-part series, and when we finished the November one, the first one, we had asked participants for homework or pre-work for this one, to complete a program's outcomes map. And so recognizing that most people did not attend that one necessarily, just wondering if you have one, not maybe that you did one knowing you'd need to do one for homework, but do you have one? Have you ever done one at your program? Oh, wow, okay. So it looks like the majority of folks are saying no, that you don't have a program outcomes map completed. I see, never mind, percentages on our poll. 7 people have said no, 1 person has said yes. Okay. Can we open a chat box? I know I'm going off script and improvising a little bit. Is it possible? Is there a chat space where people could just put in the chat an answer to a different question? The question is, are you familiar with a program outcomes mapping? Have you ever done one before? Could you say yes or no to that question in the chat box? To the left of your main screen, you'll see the chat box. I see a no. Thanks for commenting. Anyone else ever done one? All right, lots of no's. I anticipate there'll be at least one yes, given the poll. Okay, so, all right. So then let's talk about programs outcomes maps then. That's a great segue to this next piece that I want to talk to with folks. So if you take a look at handout number 4 in the packet, this is a screenshot of the first page of that handout, but handout number 4 is a sample outcomes map that I've pulled together, like the disclaimer in movies, right? This is informed by fictitious characters. It's not a real institution. I named the school after myself, the Warner School of Education. But this is a sample outcomes map, just to give you an example, right, of what one could look like. Typically an outcomes map, what you would want to do is, if you see here on the, see if I can draw, I'm going to use some of my skills here. Here, oh, maybe that didn't work. Oh, there we go. There, I'm trying to circle it. This left column on your screen, this is the core requirements column. So the idea would be to lay out in one column, right, all of the core requirements in the program. I guess this is one shot of the entire handout. So if you could see, if you're looking at the handout, what you'll see as you go down that first column is there are courses in this program of studies that are laid out, right? And so you see on the screen, it starts with MAP 115, PHED 190, SED 403, right? So there are some courses. And this program map is organized around core requirements, professional ed courses. But then as you go down the column, there's a list of the elementary methods courses. Student teaching is captured in that left column. And other program completion requirements are captured in that left column. Things like, for this program, Praxis 1, Praxis 2, a performance portfolio. So the idea would be first just lay out, right, on your map, what are all of the, I will call them learning opportunities, right? Opportunities for candidates to learn, for candidates to demonstrate what they've learned. What are they? Both through courses, through field experiences, and other opportunities that the program offers. Then you would, ideally in a generic program's outcome map, you'd have a number of columns here that would then align to your program, like your conceptual framework of your program. So for example, if your program is committed to, I think about the work of my friend Margarita Bianca, and her program in teacher prep out in Colorado is committed to preparing candidates to be social justice oriented educators. So her program outcomes map would have a column around social justice, right? This particular program privileges, and to the point of our workshop today, culturally responsive teaching practice, and so there is a column to be able to identify like where in the program are there opportunities for culturally responsive teaching practice. This program also is very interested in data literacy, so there is a column there designed to capture where the opportunities across this program are for candidates to develop their data literacy skills, okay? And so the idea of the program map is to lay out what currently is in place in our program, what exists. So as you look at this, what you can see is that I see Lynn is calling it a curriculum map. Exactly. This is the same concept, right? It's the same idea. It's just a way for you to be able to get the blueprint, like what is it that we're doing in our program. And so in this sample map, what this program has done is laid out all of the opportunities that currently exist for culturally responsive practice and for data literacy to be taught, and then also for candidates potentially to demonstrate that they've acquired those skills. So take a minute. We don't have a whole lot of time. Give you 1 minute, 2 minutes. Let's say 2 minutes. If you have that notebook there handy, to just do a simple table for yourself based on what you know from your program. Maybe it's just for, you do this for the courses that you're teaching, if you're teaching in the program. And think about in that course or in the courses you're familiar with or in the clinical experiences that you're familiar with or teach in, what are the opportunities for candidates to learn about, develop culturally responsive practice, and then also data literacy. So while people are doing that, I'm noticing there is a question in our chat box and our holding pen about a theory of change regarding the outcomes map. This is actually a separate thing. I think of the theory of change as a simple sort of statement about, how do I distinguish it? I think the theory of change is more designed to be an all-encompassing statement that captures the if we do this, then this will happen, right? So if I could see doing an outcomes map, if we ensure that we have a cohesive and coherent program of studies that embeds signature assignments and assessments for candidates to learn about and demonstrate knowledge, skills, and competencies related to culturally responsive data literacy, then we will produce candidates who will be culturally responsive data literate teachers in school systems in our state. And something like that, right, would be a theory of change. This is just part of the process, right? It's actually part of your change process. Ellen, Susan, I invite you to respond to that as well.
I mean, this is Ellen. I think it's a great question. There are 3 different kinds of theories that are applicable here: theory of learning, theory of change, theory of action. And they're not dissimilar, but what we're talking about is truly a theory of change for the programs of identifying where these topical comments or concepts can be embedded into your curriculum map, where it makes sense in the courses to introduce these notions of culturally responsive data literacy and what might be the expected outcome. And to me, the expected outcome is to increase awareness, not just of your faculty, but outcomes in terms of your candidates being better prepared to meet the needs of all students, as diverse as they are. So, Rosa, does that make sense to you?
That makes a lot of sense to me. Question is, does it make sense to our participants?
Absolutely. I mean, the key is to think very deeply about your course structures and where the introduction of these topics can most effectively be introduced. We're not saying, a standalone course, at least from the standpoint of the data perspective. Our feeling is that the concept of data literacy, and now merged with culturally responsive practice, should be a topic that is introduced and reintroduced in appropriate places throughout your curricula, where appropriate, where relevant, so that it becomes almost embedded and enculturated within your course structure and understood by your candidates, so that they don't leave your program, go out to practice without an understanding and awareness of the need to think about diverse data sources and the complexity of the children that they will be working with.
Thanks, Ellen. I'm going to go ahead and move us along. So, the first step is to lay out what currently is in place. And I do want to mention, too, that ideally, you wouldn't be doing this on your own. Ideally, this is the work that a team of faculty and staff would come together to do together, right, to really take a good look at your program and identify ways to strengthen it. The next step would be to then analyze, right? And so you would want to take that outcomes map and code all of the different experiences, the things that you put inside of the map. And so here's a sample, the same map we were just looking at. This is handout 5 in your packet. This is an example of what a coded map might look like. You'll notice at the top there is a key here, right? And there are 4 codes in the key. The blue indicates introduced, the orange reinforced, the yellow demonstrated, and the green mastered. So the idea would be, now as a team, you would look at your program outcomes map, and you would try to characterize, right, the type of experience or opportunity or expectation that's in those boxes. So, for example, in Math 115 on this first page on the screen, in the data literacy column, there was a note that, we've got an assigned reading, the work of this particular researcher or theorist, that, that's an opportunity for candidates to learn about data literacy. What you're doing now as you code is you're thinking about, well, what kind of opportunity is that assigned reading creating? Like, is it an opportunity for them to be introduced to a concept? Is it an opportunity to reinforce something they've already learned about? For them to demonstrate their knowledge or their skills in relation to that, or to demonstrate like mastery, right? And so on this outcome map, the team coded it a blue, indicating like, oh no, this is just an introduction to the concept, right? And if you look through that handout, number 5, at the full map, you'll see, a lot of code. Well, you'll see them all coded, but you'll see there's a lot of blue, orange, and yellows indicating the introduced, reinforced, demonstrated. And then at the end, on the last page of the completed outcomes map, you'll see some greens indicating like these are opportunities for the candidates to show mastery. And that's typical, right? Like we often expect to put those mastery type activities towards the end of the program, right? That's how we would scaffold out the learning. And so this would be the next step, right, is where the staff, you would come together and you would take a look at what is, and you would try to start coding. A couple of things that are interesting that I just want to point out on the sample map, right, is that you see like in ED-UC 101, the bottom of the screen, the bottom of page 1 of the map, that there's stuff in their map in relation to the culturally responsive practice and the data literacy, and that they are both coded in blue, meaning like ideas are being introduced there, right? And then if you go through the outcomes map, if you have a copy of the handout available, what you notice is that later on, when you get into ED-UC 242, there are examples of where candidates' culturally responsive practice is being reinforced. And then in 311, you see example of where both culturally responsive practice and data literacy are being there's an opportunity for candidates to demonstrate their mastery, right? ED-UC 311, this course in this program called Managing the Diverse Classroom, this particular program, if you look closely at that map, has an assignment tag there called the Equity Dilemma Assignment. Handout number, I believe it's number 8 in your packet, that we're not going to go through in any detail, but we wanted to make available to you, is a sample assignment. It's this very assignment, this equity dilemma assignment, that we put a sample of the assignment in the packet just so that you could see, like an example of like what an assignment could be. You can please feel free to, use it, adopt it as it is. This is an assignment I actually adapted for our work on this workshop, one that I've used for many years in my teaching, and through my awesome collaboration with Ellen, have revised to be more inclusive of the data literacy piece. And so we wanted to share that with you, but that's like a good example of like when you are doing your analysis of your program, these are kind of things to look for. Like, where are the opportunities in our program that we're creating for candidates to, in relation to both of these ideas of culturally responsive practice and data literacy, for them to be introduced, for it to be reinforced, for them to demonstrate like sort of their understanding, but then for them to also demonstrate mastery. And then, as you can imagine, the next step would be, after you do that, thinking about, well, what are the gaps, right? Like, where are there opportunities that we can strengthen the program? I'm going to pause for a second to just see if people have any questions, because I think I might be going fast. Again, feel free to use the chat at any time. We'll try to be attentive there.
While we're waiting to see if there are any questions, Saroja, I have a question that just, I'm wondering if the outcomes map that you're sharing, the sample that you're sharing from the Warner School of Education is, to some extent, does it offer a picture of the balance of activities and learning opportunities you are suggesting that the program should have across the 4-year preparation program?
From the sample one?
Yes.
Yes. Well, that's that a good look for, right? Ellen, Susan, you're absolutely right. So like when you look at the sample one, where do you see blanks, blank boxes? You know, and that's the kind of question you would want to ask yourself, right? When you do an outcomes map, you know, what you're trying to do is capture what is, but then in an effort to identify what is not. Like where are we missing opportunities? This one, as I look at it, I have to apologize too. I have a lot of paper on my desk and I've somehow lost the order here. But as I look at this example, it seems as if this is a program that has a lot of opportunities for candidates to learn about culturally responsive practice, but as we would suspect, Ellen, right, not so much around data literacy, as there's a lot of white space in the data literacy column.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. Okay, I don't know, maybe my thing is frozen then, because
Go ahead and just let us know when you would like the slides to advance, Saroja. I'd be happy to.
Okay, thank you, because I don't know what slide we're on right now. It looks like my thing is frozen. So we are hopefully on slide 19. Thank you for that. And as I mentioned before, you know, and we've been saying that the best way to do this kind of work is to do this in teams, right? Like in an ideal world, we would be on our campuses, we would be in a room chopping this up with our colleagues, laying out our program, you know, probably not even on paper and computers, probably on a big whiteboard, right, or chart paper, and trying to look at what is, analyze where there are opportunities for us to get better. I want to just note to folks that handout 6 in your packet is a full outcomes analysis protocol. So what we've been walking you through today, the steps and the idea of, you know, bringing a team together and doing the analysis together as a team, the questions that the team should sort of ask themselves, just like the question Susan asked, right? Like, you know, is this a balanced program as we look at the whole thing laid out? Where are there opportunities for us to be doing better? And not just sort of in addressing culturally responsive practice and data literacy as these separate things, which is, I think, what the table might, you know, lead people to focus on, but rather where is there an opportunity for the synergy, right, for us to be talking about culturally responsive data literacy. I think that equity dilemma assignment that I called out just a moment ago is a great example of where in a particular course in a program, there is one assignment that sort of brings these things together as one. And then if we look at the next slide, 20, this is, again, using that sample that we've been working from in this process of analyzing. Once you've sort of analyzed what is, this is what I think is the most fun part of the process, and that's the imagining what could be, right? You'll see on this particular outcomes map an additional code added at the top called added opportunity. And the idea behind this additional code is to now, as a team, look at those white spaces, but even look at the spaces that are filled in and start thinking about how could we strengthen our program to better prepare our candidates, and then better also as program staff and faculty, you know, assess their understanding, their competencies for culturally responsive data literacy. So handout number 7 in your packet is the full example of this particular screenshot that you're looking at on the screen, and it has that added opportunity bucket. What's interesting as you look through the handout, the full outcomes map, and this new color-coded box, the added opportunity one throughout the map, is it's kind of the same thing. This program, in their attempt to do better, you know, initially realized that, you know, we don't really know what it is that we're going to do. We know we got to do something, And so they seem to have decided the starting place is, oh, we need to revise the assignments, right? Like that there are some assignments already in these programs, in these courses, and we're going to revise them. So if you just look at the screen on page 1, Special Ed 403, the added opportunity would be, oh, we're going to revise this assignment to be inclusive of CRDL. In Special Ed 406, revise the reflection assignment to be inclusive of CRDL. So they're trying to build on what already is as a way to start. And so if we can just advance to the next slide. And again, slide 21, this was, again, put in initially when we thought that we were going to have the same participants and people working in teams. Just reiterating to folks again, this work is best done when you can work with your program team, and that handout fixes that full protocol. And so to move to this final slide 22 for this section, I know this was a lot of information and a lot of quick talking, but what we hope is that there's a takeaway for you in all of this. And so we would love for folks to just put in the chat any key takeaways from what we've shared with you so far today, particularly around this value of program outcomes mapping. And any next steps. Maybe it's not a takeaway. Maybe it is, hey, this has just triggered me to think of like what I need to do the next time I see my folks, right? Like we need to do this. We need to meet maybe even and talk about this. We need to do some professional learning. Maybe it's triggered you to learn something about what you need to do for yourself. Like, hey, I need to learn more about what some of my colleagues are doing in like the parallel courses. So we'd love for people to share any next steps or key takeaways. Thanks, Joan, for that. Yes, absolutely, Emily. I think like any kinds of outcome mapping is useful. So like in the professional learning space, I think it could be a useful exercise as well. Yes, that's right. We've got to do the work, right? It might take a while for the state standards to catch up. That's been Ellen and I's experience. So in the meantime, we have a lot of influence and power at the program level about what the candidates learn.
Yeah, let me take a shot at the state standards. One of the hopes that we have for a next step with this work is to work with the organization that does deal with the state standards to provide some concrete language for integration into the state standards. Not that we want this to be accountability, but if the people who are part of, I'll give you the acronym, NASDTEC, if they can work with the state departments of education to put into the standards and requirements culturally responsive data literacy, then everyone will understand what exactly it is and how it might be better integrated to piggyback on the exercise you just experienced. Because we're a little behind in time, while people are adding on, let us move forward to the next topic. Because it's very much related to what Saroja just walked you through. A sort of a theoretical question that the three of us have asked ourselves over the past year and a half as we've been thinking about this merger of culturally responsive data literacy is, if you think about data literacy on the x-axis here and culturally responsive practice on the y-axis, obviously the upper right quadrant is what we are all aiming for, to for educators to be high in both concepts to make it culturally responsive data literacy. And obviously we would not want people in the lower left quadrant. But the off diagonal is always the question and concern because of the way definition of data literacy is, if you're high on that, should you automatically have culturally responsive practices as part of your repertoire? So Saroja and I sort of have engaged in a conversation, and we will go forward with that right now and say, so Saroja, you're an expert in culturally responsive practice, and I'm an expert in data literacy. Let's discuss the practicalities of these quadrants, especially the off diagonal. Obviously, the objective is to have teachers high on both CRT and DL.
Right, and we discussed, like, is it possible to be high DL and low CRT? Maybe we need to rationalize this as well as the possibility of being high on CR and low on DL. Absolutely right. Let's take the lower quadrant first. From my perspective, there are some data literacy skills needed for cultural responsiveness, particularly the need to use multiple data sources. If we look to the full construct of data literacy for teachers that we developed, data skills are combined with Lee Schulman's 7 forms of knowledge that include knowledge of context, knowledge of the learner. But what's not made explicit is the need for addressing the whole child, particularly using an asset-based approach. Exactly. And didn't you say something about the equity-based data literature? That there's now research that supports the notion that diverse data sources and understanding the whole child is essential?
Spot on. Also, because data are often equated with accountability, as I mentioned before, and the accountability movement, and specifically test scores, there are difficulties with dealing with the most challenged students whose capabilities may not well be demonstrated by standardized measures. So yes, there is an emerging literature on just that topic.
And that's exactly why we need to approach data from an asset perspective, not a deficit model. Like examining the positives, right? Student background, student interests, etc.
So where does this leave that with the bottom quadrant?
Well, that's still unclear. Let's look at the opposite quadrant to see if that helps. Educators who understand how to be culturally responsive should know how to look at the whole child and assume an asset-based approach. They should recognize that traditional measures of students may not necessarily provide a full picture of the student. Such measures provide a limited view of the student. They don't explain the why, that is, the surrounding contextual factors that may contribute or impede a student. Those are really important.
Absolutely, you're reading my mind. But I can see educators who exhibit cultural responsiveness, as I understand it, but may lack many of the necessary skills, knowledge, and dispositions that comprise data literacy for teachers. And therefore, I would say that being in this quadrant is entirely possible. Such educators may know how to use diverse data sources, but they may not be able to demonstrate other sophisticated skills to be considered data literate. But I think I'm convinced about one of our questions.
So am I, but what about the other? Let's see what others think.
So please use the chat. We want to hear from you all. What do you think about these quadrants? Do they make sense? What's possible in your view? So what we're asking you here in the chat, please share your thoughts about those off diagonals that Saroja and I just discussed. Do you think it's possible to be low on culturally responsive practice and high on data literacy? Or alternatively, do you think it's possible to be high on culturally responsive practice and low on data literacy?
I think what's really interesting too, Joan, about this idea of high CRP and low DL is also that I think it shows in that outcomes map, the sample one that I shared, right? That like here's a program that has prioritized culturally responsive teaching practice, and the data literacy part is thin. And like to Ellen and I's work, like what we've seen is that's probably more typical and situation, right? That like many programs, and that's reflective too, right, Ellen, like of standards even. Like you probably see more attention to culturally responsive teaching in standards than data literacy.
I think that's true. When we looked at that in preparation for this, absolutely true, because that is a more emergent construct, shall we say, but still not fully explicated in state standards. But I want to bring attention to an issue that was just brought up, and I apologize if I murder your name. So Lara brings up the issue, one of the bugaboos for me is the conflation of assessment literacy and data literacy. And again, that goes to thinking more broadly about data and what data are, that the more we think only of standardized test scores, the more it moves us away from culturally responsiveness, the whole child perspective, and the asset model, because those who are most impacted negatively by such measures are the ones that we are trying to reach with the idea of culturally responsive practice. We're getting some great responses here. Thank you, Natalie, for bringing in the contextual variables. That's really important. For those of you who are in TPA states, there is a rubric in there about assessment, I won't say assessment literacy, but assessment. But they have something that's called the assets or the surrounding variables, and it's very much what Natalie has just raised about, what's the home situation. Of course, student indices are going to be front and center for understanding where a child is academically. But if you think more broadly, those contextual variables and data sources are the ones that are going to help you understand from where the child is coming and how to help them to move toward their interests and their assets. Okay, so let me move to the next slide now. And again, another chat for all of you. So given what Saroja and I have just been talking about for the last hour or so, given these discussions, do you think there are places in your curricula where CRDL can be integrated, and would the faculty be amenable? And I know right before the lockdown, on behalf of Susan and Saroja and myself, I went off to the CAPE conference in New Orleans, which was risky in and of itself, but I spoke in front of maybe 150, 200 people about the topic and the work that the three of us have been doing. And there was incredible interest in this topic, a lot of good discussion about where within the curriculum, how this would happen, who might be teaching it. Is it in practical experiences? Is it in the capstone course? Is it in classroom management? Is it in an assessment course? All sorts of really interesting ideas came out. One of the thoughts is for you to think about your program, because we understand the diversity of programs. You might be in a huge land grant. You might be a department of only a couple of faculty members. So how does it work for your institution where this might be integrated and introduced among your faculty and on behalf of your students and the districts into which they are going to be placed?
I just wanted to comment to, is it Jana, about the action research course? Absolutely. Like, I think action research courses are, first of all, I think they're just the greatest thing that ever hit teacher prep. That's just my perspective. And probably because I teach in a program where that's our capstone. It's a graduate program, and that's our capstone for the candidates. And so in our capstone action research course, in the section I've taught for years, I have had the students do an equity-focused action research topic, which provides, again, that opportunity for them to demonstrate their mastery, but continue to also learn, right, while they're preparing to demonstrate mastery, their culturally responsive practice, and their uses of data about students. And so while I never used the concept of culturally responsive data literacy in my work, it's essentially what they've been doing for years through that program and through action research. So I think that's such a great idea.
So it's interesting that that topic and suggestion comes up, because when we were creating the special interest group at AERA around data-driven decision-making, one of the questions that I was confronted with was to differentiate what is action research and what is data-driven decision-making. And I had to look to some experts to see the difference. But the fact that this has been brought up speaks to the essential nature of the integration. Classroom management, absolutely. And Lynn, your comment about assessment and student teaching, my comment there, and for those who have known my work, is to expand the notion of what data are, that they're not just summative, formative, benchmark, interim, student indices, but the other kinds of data that help to support. So bring an awareness in an assessment course about the diversity of data so that you can better interpret what's going on with a student. Because if they can't get to school, if they are not attending school, if they're late or truant, all of those roll into their ability to perform on student performance indices. Even taking into consideration home situation, like are they in foster care? Are they in a homeless shelter? How do you give assignments to students in that situation? Are they a military family? And are they worrying about a deployed parent? Joe Biden has spoken eloquently about that. So home climate is really important here. And Jessica, thank you for raising the topic of ethics, because we are doing work on exactly that, of how do you use data in what I refer to as a responsible manner. And that goes to using the right data to answer the question at hand. So thank you so much for raising that issue.
And just a reminder, Ellen, that in the handout packet, handout 3 lists the many areas of questions and data that the Ed Prep faculty may consider in building activities into their courses.
Oh, thank you, Susan, for reminding me of that. Let me direct you to handout 3. In the first session, Saroja and I produced 3 different sets of questions for you to consider, and they could be used almost as guiding questions. One is about the academic background of a student. The second one is about home situation or the context from which a student comes and what they bring to your classroom. And then the third one, and we're trying to get away from social desirability, but more to build awareness. It's about implicit bias. So asking questions for people to think about what implicit biases and assumptions do you bring to your classroom. So Susan, thank you so much for reminding me of that. And one of the things that we will be doing going forward is providing resources around those kinds of guiding questions and the other materials to help you think about how you might use those materials in your programs. So I think, at this point, why don't we turn it over back to you, Susan, to bring us home from what hopefully was a very engaging session to our participants.
Thank you, Ellen. Let me just give everyone just a another minute to add any question that you have in the chat. Make sure you have downloaded today's files from the lower left so that you have both the Word document with all the handouts. We hope that they are helpful in terms of having the frame of what the data literacy framework is that Ellen Mandenek and colleagues developed that is described and could be used in some of your follow-up courses and your work with faculty, and as well as today's slides. And post any questions that you have. One that came up sort of indirectly in one of the chats where we were asking you to share your thoughts is a comment from Joan Johnson saying she does not see a lot of data literacy reflected in college classes. And I wonder, Ellen, if you might just reflect on that comment a bit about what your experience has been around particularly teaching data literacy in ed prep programs, and if it's on the increase or what's the current state on that?
Okay, thanks, Susan, and thank you, Joan, for that question. We don't have another hour and a half to chat about this topic. I mean, what we know based on a survey done now 5-6 years ago is that educator prep programs report that they are teaching about data, but it's really about assessment. And again, as we're talking about culturally responsive data literacy, and we've reiterated it throughout this session and the prior one, this is really beyond just assessment literacy. So yes, there is a dearth. The question of standalone course or integration, again, there is the issue of who will teach the courses. And do you have the people, do you have the wiggle room in your curriculum? And we've heard many people say that they want to do this, they just don't have the right people to do it. One of the goals that we have is to develop materials that you all can use and integrate into your courses. In 2016, Edith Gummer and I gave the keynote address at the CAPE conference in DC in front of, 1,500, 2,000 people, at which we did a survey. And almost everyone, minus one respondent, said, this is an important topic, we must do it, it must be integrated. They gave us some suggestions of where it might be integrated. And at that point, we were only talking about data literacy. So to this question, it's no longer should we, but how do we? And then to provide materials so that it can be done. So thank you for that question.
Thank you, Ellen. I do not see any additional new questions in the chat, so I think we'll move on. As I mentioned at the beginning, we're very interested in your feedback, so I would ask you to please take our survey to help us improve. And if you want to follow up with our presenters today, their contact information is on the slides, which hopefully you have received either through the invitation or on today's download. There are also multiple references, citations for the work that was shared today and in the prior session, and we invite you to explore those as well. Again, this session was provided by the Regional Education Laboratory Northeastern Islands, and we are happy to hear from you and follow up with you if you have any questions after today. I want to thank our presenters, Saroja Warner and Ellen Mandenek, for sharing their work with us, and encourage you to continue to bring these two bodies of work together, and would love to have you back to share more in the future. Thank you so much.
Susan, let me just add, particularly for those in the Northeast, but more broadly, if you're interested in this topic, please get in touch with Saroja and me. We are happy to provide more information, more resources, and a possibility of collaboration is always welcome to everyone.
Thank you, Ellen. And thank you all for participating today and for all your great comments in the chat.